Why did she do it? If she didn't love him, why did she get married? Why did she say yes to the proposal? That's still the question in my mind to this day, is why.
Stacey Schoeck received eventually a sentence of life without parole. She will never be released in prison except in a box.
When you look into the eyes of the so-called devil woman of Michigan, what do you see?
I see exactly what I saw from the very beginning. She's one of the most manipulative people that you'll ever meet in your entire life.
Marriage is supposed to be a commitment between two people who truly care about one another and want to live out the rest of their lives together. But unfortunately for some people, it's nothing more than a way for them to use someone else so that they can get what they want. The following stories tell the tale of 3 marriages that ended in horrifically brutal murders.
Go ahead, ma'am. Oh my God, please, I need help right now.
Stacey and Richard Schoeck were supposed to be celebrating Valentine's Day as a couple in 2010, but instead, the evening turned into nothing short of a nightmare. Richard was Stacey's 5th husband. She seemed to get bored and move on quickly, but Stacey's relationship with Richard seemed to be stable, and many hoped that this was finally the man she was meant to spend the rest of her life with. Not only did he love Stacey, but he also seemed to really care about her children, who he had become the adoptive father of. Valentine's Day 2010 was supposed to be a romantic but simple night for the couple.
Stacey and Richard had Valentine's to exchange for each other, gifts and cards. She made the decision that they would exchange them in the park. She told him to go ahead and meet her there because the nurse that was relieving her was late.
But things would soon take a deadly turn. Stacey pulled up to the spot where she had arranged to meet her husband and was met with a horrifying spot. Richard was lying on the ground next to his truck and heavily bleeding. In a panic, Stacey called 911.
He's been what? He's been shot. He is dead.
Law enforcement rushed to the scene.
It's a very secluded place. There was no pavement. There was no lights. And so it's a very eerie place, especially at night.
It was there that they confirmed Richard was dead, and that whoever had done it had been careful not just to wound him, but to make sure he would never be getting up again. His body was riddled with bullets.
2 to the abdomen and 1 to the chest, and then 2 to the face, which is overkill.
So was this just a robbery gone bad? All signs pointed to no. If it had been, the robber would have taken Richard's valuables, but everything was still there.
When we searched his truck, we found there was $40 in the center console. His watch was on, his wedding ring was on, his wallet was on him. If it were a robbery, then there was about a $40,000 truck sitting there idling that they could have jumped in and taken.
Something seemed off about the whole entire thing. This didn't seem like a random attack. Instead, it seemed as if Richard might have known his attacker.
Richard's just a regular guy who's unarmed, and he gets there and he's comfortable enough to get out of his truck and approach the person who ultimately shot him to death.
Detectives brought Stacey in for questioning, and she seems totally distraught. She also has a secret that nobody else had known about so far. She had been having an affair.
I'm in deep with Juan.
Stacey was cheating on her husband with one of her own employees. The man was named Juan Reyes, and this had been going on for about 6 or 7 months behind Richard's back.
I don't know anything about how this happened.
Okay, all right.
One of the first thoughts that law enforcement had was that maybe this was an act of jealousy and that Juan had killed Richard in order to get him out of the picture so that he could have Stacey to himself.
When we asked her if she thought Juan was responsible, she'd say she didn't want to think that he was responsible, but she didn't know.
Juan was a divorced father with a lot of children who was struggling to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Stacey had money and could afford to get him the things he wanted. She paid for his truck and his cell phone, and she even took him on luxurious vacations. But that was hardly the end of it.
Stacey also had an apartment for her and Juan to go do their not so good deed.
Juan is arrested and agrees to be questioned by the detectives.
Did you have anything to do with what's happened to Richard?
No.
Do you know?
No.
Who did?
But Juan explains that he didn't have any reason to kill Richard because he didn't really want to be with Stacey. In fact, he wanted to get back with his ex-wife. He had just been using Stacey for her money, which he says she knew.
If she knows I'm low on cash, she'll give me some money for years, cash for gas or whatever.
Juan also had an alibi. He had been with his children the time that Richard had been killed. His ex-wife, who had no reason to lie for him, would also be able to confirm his story. So if Juan wasn't the one who killed Richard, who did? Detectives hadn't ruled out the fact that Stacey could know more about how her husband died than she was letting on. So they got a search warrant that would allow them to go through her email. It didn't take long for them to find something suspicious. Just days before Richard was murdered, Stacey had transferred a large sum of money to someone by the name of Lenitra Ross. Lenitra had been staying in a rental home that was owned by Stacey and claimed that the money that had been sent to her was to be used for repairs on the house. This seemed to check out, and it seemed like they might be reaching another dead end. That is, until they noticed something. Outside of Lenitra's home was an Impala. Detectives were aware of this vehicle. Stacey's grandparents had given her the vehicle to sell, but instead she had kept it around. And there was something about this car that immediately caught the eye of one detective. The vehicle's tires had the exact same tread that they had found at the murder scene.
I jumped up. I became extremely excited.
After looking into phone records, law enforcement would find that both Lenitra and Stacey had been in contact with a man named Reginald Coleman. Reginald was a personal trainer and a friend of Lenitra. He was known as Mr. Results. He was also, much more importantly, a hitman. Law enforcement had reason to believe that Stacey had enlisted Lenitra to help connect with Reginald, and that together they had arranged a murder for hire plot. Stacey had much to gain from her husband's death due to his large life insurance policy that she would inherit. She could use a portion of that money to pay off Reginald for taking care of the murder. Eventually, law enforcement had enough evidence to arrest Stacey, Lenitra, and Reginald. There was just one last thing that they were needing: a confession. And after 7 months in custody, Stacey gave it to them. She explained that she didn't want a divorce and she just wanted Richard dead. She was also concerned that if she was to divorce Richard, he might be able to take custody of her children since he was their adoptive father. After pleading guilty to murder, Stacey finally got what she truly deserved.
Stacey Schoeck received eventually a sentence of life without parole. She will never be released in prison except in a box.
In Iron County, the murder trial of Kelly Cochran continued today.
Kelly Cochran did something so horrific that she earned herself the pretty unforgettable nickname, the Devil Woman of Michigan.
Cochran is accused of murdering her former lover, 53-year-old Christopher Regan of Iron River. She allegedly helped her now-deceased husband, Jason Cochran, kill, dismember, and then hide the remains of Regan.
When Jason Cochran found out that Kelly, his wife of 13 years, had been cheating on him with another man, there was only one thing he wanted. He wanted that man dead, and he wanted her to help him kill him. After that, all would be forgiven. The man that Kelly had been having an affair with was 53-year-old Christopher Regan. Christopher was a co-worker of Kelly's, and when he got involved with her, he had no idea of what kind of evil he was messing with. After agreeing to her jealous husband's evil plan, Kelly lured Christopher to a secluded area by promising to have relations with him. And when he got there, Jason was waiting, with a firearm ready. Jason fired at Christopher and killed him at point-blank range. When that was done, Jason and Kelly worked together to use a buzzsaw to dismember Christopher's body. It was a gory job that would make anyone sick to their stomach, but to Kelly, who had a heart of stone, it was nothing more than taking care of business. What Jason didn't know at the time was that in just 2 short years, it would be he who was Kelly's next victim. Kelly became resentful of the fact that Jason had made her carry out and cover up Christopher's murder, and eventually she decided that she wanted him gone too. So with the help of an illegal substance, she killed him as well. Kelly tried to make Jason's death look like an accident, but it wasn't until until investigators took a closer look at how he really died that they discovered that it was a murder and Kelly was the primary suspect. When Kelly was tracked down and brought in for questioning, it didn't take detectives long to realize that the person they were dealing with was a full-on psycho.
When you look into the eyes of the so-called devil woman of Michigan, what do you see?
I see exactly what I saw from the very beginning. She's one of the most manipulative people that you'll ever meet in your entire life.
Kelly was almost too proud to admit that she had a special skill for manipulating people and getting them to do what they want.
I watch and I study people. Obviously, you do too. Mm-hmm. And how they act and how they seem to feel and react to others.
And it's all about whether or not you can use that particular emotion to manipulate.
Not always.
But a lot of the time.
Kelly then explained in horrific detail what she and Jason had done to Christopher, and then later what she had done to Jason. She was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. During Kelly's trial, a video was played in court that showed Kelly telling Police Chief Laura Frizzo how she dismembered Christopher's body.
So this is cut like this from up here to here. And I would say almost every drop of blood was on the part was on the floor.
In a courtroom while this was going on sat Christopher's own sons, listening.
Regan's 2 sons in the courtroom this morning sat and watched as the jury also saw footage of the woman accused of killing their father lead Frizzo to where she said Regan's remains could be found.
Kelly never showed any remorse for her actions. She said that she hated Jason and that killing him was nothing more than evening the score. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole.
Brand new tapes of Jordan Graham, the Montana woman who pled guilty last week to pushing her husband off a cliff. Just 8 days after their wedding, the tape shed new light on what led to that fatal moment.
Your wedding day is supposed to be one of the happiest, most wonderful days of your whole life. It is something that you look forward to and later think back on with happy memories. But this was the absolute opposite case for Jordan Lynn Graham. Jordan met Cody Johnson in their small hometown in Montana, not far from Glacier National Park. The couple met through their church, and religion was something that was very important to both of them. They both had very similar values, and it seemed like they were meant to be.
She was a good girl.
Even though they were only in their early 20s, Cody was already starting to envision a future with Jordan.
Cody was really looking forward to getting married. He loved children and couldn't wait to have his own, and he thought Jordan was the one for him.
But to those who were her closest friends and knew Jordan well, there was something off about the relationship. It seemed like Cody was really, really into Jordan, but that she wasn't as into him.
He put a lot into the relationship that she didn't put back. He always wanted to hang out with her, and she would always make an excuse not to. He was madly in love with her. She, on the other hand, was distant.
Considering that they thought that Jordan wasn't that into Cody, you can imagine their surprise when they found out not only had Cody proposed, but Jordan had accepted.
I didn't think that she would say yes.
Was she even attracted to him?
I don't believe so.
Now, it wasn't as if Jordan couldn't have had other options and been able to find someone else that she was actually attracted to if she tried looking. After all, she was only 21 years old when they met. She had her whole life ahead of her. So why agree to marry someone she wasn't actually in love with?
So was she interested in the idea of being married?
I think she liked the idea of being married and having a wedding. I don't think she really wanted to, per se.
Jordan's friends could tell that she was hesitant about getting married to Cody. She would come to them for advice, and they would urge her to go and talk to the person that she should be addressing these worries with, the guy she was supposedly going to marry.
She had asked me a couple of times if she was making the right decision, and I told her that I couldn't answer that question for her. I told her that if you have second thoughts about this, you need to talk to him about it.
Despite what seemed to many like cold feet, Jordan decided that she was going to go through with the wedding. But she showed very little interest in all the stuff leading up to it that is supposed to be really important to every soon-to-be bride. She didn't really care about her dress or her veil. She didn't really even want to take part in planning the wedding. The wedding day eventually arrived, and still Jordan hadn't called it off. Her friends became more and more worried when they saw how off her emotions and mood seemed to be, just minutes before walking down the aisle. At one point she was crying, and then the next minute she was just acting like she was completely uninterested. It was like she didn't even want to look at her soon-to-be husband. Jordan's closest friends could tell this wasn't good. This wasn't good at all.
She was standing there holding his hand, and she was looking down at the ground the whole time. I started to panic a little bit watching her, and her face just looked like something was gonna happen.
And sure enough, the day after the wedding, Jordan texted her friend Kimberly, who had also been her maid of honor. She seemed to be expressing some regrets about getting married.
I don't know if all this was the right thing to do. So much happened last night. I just don't know.
Last night at the wedding or last night at the room?
Being married and after the wedding.
It seemed to be sinking into Jordan that at some point Cody was gonna want to do marital activities with her, and she was completely dreading it.
She came over and she laid on the couch and she just cried. She wouldn't tell me why. She wouldn't say anything to me.
Jordan seemed perfectly willing to put off having relations with Cody for as long as she possibly could. She was even prepared to make up lies to use as excuses in case he showed interest.
Using the my period started spiel tonight. I freaking hope it works. Because if I'm forced to do something, I'm going to freak out.
It sounds like Jordan and Cody never got around to actually consummating the marriage.
Do you know if Cody and Jordan ever had sex?
I honestly don't think they did. I think she tried to I don't even think they had sex on the night of their wedding.
Just 8 days after Cody and Jordan got married, something very strange happened. Cody hadn't been showing up to work, and he hadn't been returning calls to friends or family members. This wasn't like him at all. And then there was Jordan, who not only didn't seem to know where her husband was, but wasn't acting the least bit worried.
She was hanging out, running around, skipping. She was going through the parking lot with her ice cream cone, just happy as can be.
So Cody is missing and everybody is frantic except for the person who should care most of all, Jordan. Clearly this would be pretty suspicious activity to anyone paying attention.
Happy?
Oh yes, very happy. She was the happiest I've ever seen her.
It was as if Jordan was finally free from the relationship that had been holding her down. Cody was reported as a missing person, and law enforcement began trying to gather information. They brought in Jordan for questioning, and she told law enforcement about what she believed her husband's plans had been.
Well, I got a message saying that he was going to go for a ride with some of his out-of-town buddies that were visiting. I had no idea who they were, but he always told me this one thing is when his friends came to visit, he would take them to Glacier Park.
Jordan seemed to be telling different people different stories about what supposedly happened in the days leading up to Cody's disappearance. She told one friend that they hadn't been fighting, but told another that they had gotten into an argument.
So she comes in and she proceeds to tell me that Cody had held her down when they were arguing, and that she got away from him and he had grabbed his keys and scratched her.
Things clearly weren't adding up, and it wasn't just Jordan's friends that were noticing, it was law enforcement too.
I'm getting some inconsistencies in what you're telling me with other information that I've already gathered, okay? Mm-hmm. And I've spoke to a few people, and it's important that I know that you're telling me the truth on things.
But Jordan insisted that she wasn't lying. She seems totally calm and almost bored while the detectives are questioning her.
And what I know.
Well,
I mean,
and I understand that, okay? But I think that there's more.
After Cody had been missing for over 48 hours, people were getting desperate to find him. They needed any information they could possibly get, but Jordan seemed annoyed and didn't want to cooperate. At one point, she supposedly got so angry that she took off her wedding ring and threw it. But then there is a strange twist in the case. Jordan tells her friend Hannah that somebody sent her an anonymous email to tell her that she can stop looking for Cody now because he is dead. dead. Hannah is understandably horrified, but Jordan, not so much.
Any emotion?
No. She wasn't crying at all. She was just showing me this email and I start shaking. And I told her to go to the cops and she did go. But I was kind of just like rushing it, like, go, move.
Law enforcement starts talking to Jordan again, and this time she claims to have an idea about where Cody's body could potentially be. It was a steep drop-off point in an area located in Glacier National Park. She said that she believed he must have fallen to her death. It was as if Jordan didn't think that law enforcement would even try to check the area to see if they could find Cody's body.
And I think at that point she expected us to just walk away from it.
Meanwhile, everyone else is wondering how Jordan ever came up with this specific spot where she thinks Cody could have fallen.
And I was like, what are you talking about? Why would he ever be going down there? Why would anybody do that? This wall is here for a reason.
But Jordan insisted that this was where she thought her husband was. She even led the way down the ravine, as if she had done it many times before.
She knew exactly how to get down there. She did it like a pro.
Sure enough, they soon made the tragic discovery. It was Cody's body in the exact spot that Jordan said it would be, just at the base of the waterfall. So, how did she know where to find him? She claimed it was divine intervention.
One of the things she said was that the Holy Spirit led her to know where he was, and that's how she found him.
Cody's injuries had been very severe and his body was battered from the steep drop.
It appeared to us that the way he fell was head first. He had injuries to both arms, to his head.
The news of Cody's death was a devastating blow to all who loved him, especially his mother.
Cody Johnson was a kind, loving, wonderful young man that I miss a lot.
Cody was the kind of person that many loved, but few thought the day would ever come when they would have to live without him.
I really wish Cody was here. He did so much for everybody. I never realized what he actually did for me until he was gone.
The day of Cody's funeral arrived, and it was a tragic day for most in attendance. This was a young man who had died in a terrible way just days after getting married. Everyone is upset, that is, except for Jordan.
She's the widow, and she's up front texting her little friend that she's sitting next to, and her mom and dad are in tears.
Nobody could ignore Jordan's careless and disrespectful attitude. What kind of person acts this way at their own husband's funeral? By this point, a lot of people, including law enforcement, are starting to think that she could really have something to do with Cody's death.
While people were talking about him and, you know, like, the funeral service is going on and she was on her phone.
I was upset about Cody's funeral, but I was furious at her.
Not long after that, detectives got the evidence against Jordan that they had been waiting on. Jordan had told them that she wasn't with Cody when he went to Glacier Park when he supposedly fell to his death. But yet, surveillance footage from the park showed that she was. Now they knew that she had lied about something so significant, law enforcement had even more reason to believe that she probably lied about Jordan saying she thought her husband just fell. They think that she pushed him. When they tell her that she is most likely going to be facing a murder charge, Jordan didn't even act surprised.
She didn't even flinch. There wasn't even an emotion.
It's likely that at this point, Jordan still believed that she could get away with all of this. But after detectives tell her that they have her on video at the park where Cody died, it seems to set in how much trouble she's in. She begins to break down and cry. Slowly, she begins to tell them more about how she was feeling leading up to her wedding day. She explained how she had been second-guessing things and wasn't excited in the way that she thought she should be.
I was feeling, should have we waited a little bit longer and then got married? I wasn't feeling like it's on cloud nine.
And then came the most important part, what she says actually happened on the day of Cody's death. She said that Cody had wanted to go on a particular trail, but she was hesitant because of how narrow a path it was. But in order to prove a point about how comfortable he was with the trail, Jordan says that Cody put a blindfold over his eyes.
I didn't want to do that trail because I was afraid. you couldn't fall on. He said I could do this with a blindfold on, and he said I could just put it on, take a step, and I wouldn't even fall. And it kept going through my head that, you are gonna fall or something.
And then came the crucial moment. The moment Cody went over the 300-foot ledge.
And we were arguing some more. And he went to grab my arm or my jacket, and I said, no, I'm gonna defend myself. So I kind of let go and I pushed, and he went over.
At this point, Jordan still seems to be acting like this was just all a horrible accident, but she's not convincing anybody.
Why did you continue to turn around and then push him off? I think it's because emotions were running so high. I was frustrated, I was angry, I was every emotion I could ever think of, all at once. And just, I've never felt like that before. I've never experienced that, such high emotion.
Jordan was then arrested and charged with Cody's murder. She initially pleaded not guilty, but later took a plea deal. This resulted with her receiving a whopping 30 years behind bars. This was a case that those involved won't soon forget. An 8-day marriage that ended with a murder. But there are still so many questions that it's hard for anybody to really have closure. Some of the obvious ones are, why did she do it? Why did she stay with Cody if she wasn't attracted to him and didn't want to be with him? Why did she ever agree to marry him? And then there's the question of why Jordan thought that murdering Cody would be a better idea than simply filing for a divorce and moving on with her life.
This day I still wonder what actually happened just before she pushed Cody off the edge of that cliff.
And to think, all of this could have been so easily avoided. Why did Jordan think this was the easiest way out? This is something that Cody's heartbroken mother may never have the answer to.
Why did she do it? If she didn't love him, why did she get married? Why did she say yes to the proposal? That's still the question in my mind to this day, is why.
Do you think that 30 years behind bars is a severe enough sentence for Jordan? After all, she took Cody's life. Doesn't she deserve to spend the rest of her life in prison? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.